For I do not exist. There exist but the thousands of mirrors that reflect me. Vladimir Nabokov, The Eye. His name is Bruce Banner. Years ago, he died. But he couldn't stop screaming. So he got up again. Something inside Bruce was unlocked that day. A dark opposite. A shadow self. Stronger than him. Stronger than anyone. Too strong for death to claim. Bruce can die during the day, but the night is his time. And when it comes, he drags Bruce back. Then he's left with haze, broken memories, and his rage in Bruce's mirror. If Bruce is the scientific self, the voice of rationality, the Hulk represents unreason. He's smarter than Bruce is, but it takes the form of hunches and gut feelings, strange synchronicities, intuitive connections, magical thinking. Within a cheap motel in Minnesota, Bruce sips his freshly made coffee as he stares at the Hulk through the reflective closet mirror. From what Bruce can remember, the mirror has never cracked before. That's new, Bruce thinks as he takes another sip of coffee. The Hulk has been like this for 2 days now. While Bruce has been doing the hard work of survival, stealing clothes, food, a credit card for a motel, he's been raging on the inside of the mirror. Bruce hasn't dared let him out since the fight with Walter Langkowski. Something had infected Walter's Sasquatch form. His attempt to create a controlled Hulk by subjecting himself to gamma radiation. The memories are hazy, but Hulk defeated Sasquatch by draining Walter's gamma energy into himself, into them. And Bruce is starting to suspect something else came with it. Bruce knows he needs to talk to the Hulk. They used to be able to. Diplomatic conferences in Baroque mindscapes, metaphorical wrestling matches. Now, Bruce needs other methods. He closes his eyes and takes a breath before emptying his mind and letting his hand move as it will. Nothing guiding the pen on the paper, but Bruce's unconscious. Automatic writing. The magician John Dee used it to transcribe the language of angels. The irony doesn't escape Bruce. When he's done, Bruce examines the scribbles on the page. Home? He asks, confused. What does that mean? Meanwhile, in a small beach house on the coast of California, Betty Ross cries to herself as she watches the news. Apparently, authorities are remaining silent on the events that left 4 dead in a Minnesota hospital. But on social media, the rumors just won't go away. The Hulk is back. Betty turns off the screen. It isn't him, she sobs. Just stop it, Betty. Stop doing this to yourself. It isn't him. Your husband isn't back from the dead. If he were back, he'd have let me know. He'd have. It isn't him. It can't be. All the while, Betty is totally unaware that she is being watched. Elsewhere, within an undersea base, a number of individuals are hung upside down, and each of them are connected to a surplus of wires leading all the way to a giant data storage tank. Moreover, their eyes have been modified by ocular circuitry that allows them to monitor whomever they so please. But they're still people. And honestly, one of the monitors is starting to feel like a creep. They're just watching innocent people in Bruce Banner's support network do nothing all day. They were under the impression that Bruce Banner would have at least shown up when Amadeus Cho hulked out and went crazy in New York. But for some reason, he didn't. Bruce should have shown up to a lot of things. He still hasn't even visited Rick Jones's grave. And that's just cold. Or his son Scar. And now they're watching Betty Ross, the daughter of General Ross. And that's like the boss of their boss. Perhaps this job is too much for you, says a man as he enters the data processing room. His name is General 14. And he has found that even monitors need to be monitored. Monitor work takes dedication, you see. Unquestioning dedication. The general peers towards the ceiling and the individuals locked into place. Maybe we should put you to work on something more your speed. We'll have your implant procedures reversed by 0600. Then you can report to sanitation for a mop. Monitor 5 will handle your feed until we install your replacement. He understands the importance of work. The rest of you, the people on those screens, are not innocent bystanders. They are not civilians. They are not friendlies. They have all given aid and comfort to the Hulk. That makes them the enemy. As you were. With General 14 is Dr. Glive. Usually, Dr. Glive doesn't ask too many questions, but he has to ask. What would Ross say if he knew what they were really up to? General 14 continues down the corridor to the location of a number of gamma experiments. He tells Dr. Glive, it's not his business to know. The general's too close to Banner. He always has been, and he understands that now. Better, he focuses completely on the Steve Rogers situation and leaves Hulk operations to a trusted second in command, such as myself. Plus, it gives him plausible deniability. I seem to remember the great American public wasn't too thrilled with how Gamma Base was run back in the day. If they knew about Shadow Base. The general pauses for a moment. More and more, the electorate understands that nothing is off the table when it comes to the security of our nation. When the enemy acts, we react in kind. Thunderbolt Ross taught me that. I fought him, you see, when he was a Hulk. And when I found out the truth, it opened my eyes. Ross turned himself into the same kind of monster he was fighting. But by doing so, he very nearly achieved final victory. He only made one mistake. He thought one monster was enough. Meanwhile, reporter Jackie McGee, who happened to be the only eyewitness to Walter's death, and Walter Langkowski are taken to the Alpha Flight space station so that the Alpha Flight team can give Walter a full medical rundown. For the record, Walter doesn't want any of this. He already checked with his teammate, the superhero known as Shaman, if any of the great beasts of the North were active, if Tanarak might be back. And Walter distinctly remembers Shaman telling him no. That's why Walter wanted to find Bruce. He thought the monster in the mirror was a psychological problem. And maybe it is. Walter still doesn't know. But he would never choose to hurt anyone. Never. Jackie isn't convinced. Walter spent half his life, millions of dollars of his own money, years of study, working to become a hairy Hulk. All of this is because Walter made a choice. Walter sits up on the medical table. I didn't choose to get stabbed, Jackie. Dying on the table was not a voluntary act. The other Alpha Flight member, Puck, attempts to ease the tension in the room. He asks Jackie, since she was the only witness, if she saw any signs of possession before the stabbing. Jackie thinks for a moment. The stabbing, something about that bothers me. It was too random, if that makes sense. There was no argument before we got there. But then, it was like the closer Walter got, the angrier they got. Shaman, the most versed with the mystic arts, explains Walter is not to blame. The thing that stole his body at the point of death and made it into a murder weapon is. However, it wasn't Tanarak, nor any beast of the North. They still slumber. This is something deeper, like a primal shadow, waiting in the darkness underneath all that is. Creation's other face. The face we cannot bear to see. The one below all. Jackie crosses her arms and huffs. Even if she did believe in possessions and forces of darkness, which she isn't saying she does, a jury will never believe it. She can't be the only one who hears how crazy all this sounds. At that moment, Captain Marvel arrives. She tells Jackie she's well aware of the outlook of the situation. But if Jackie will give Alpha Flight the room for a moment, Carol will answer all the reporters' questions when she's finished. Jackie obliges, and once she's out of sight, Captain Marvel places her hands on her hips and returns her gaze towards Walter. Walter, she tells him, I just finished talking to one General 14. He's currently in charge of U.S. Hulk operations. A call to Thaddeus Ross confirmed that. Ex-USAF, like me, he played that card a lot. He's a very charming man who very charmingly threatened you with lethal injection after extradition and trial, of course. For what it's worth, he was very apologetic. He'd love to make it all go away under other circumstances. She turns to the rest of the team. We have Walter's gamma signature with Alpha Flight satellite coverage. We could locate him if we had to. Or we could find a signature very similar to Walter's, like Bruce Banner's. Essentially, if my team secures Banner for the proper authorities, Walter is exonerated. If I say no, they take him instead. I don't have a choice. It's nighttime, and Bruce Banner is walking alone along an empty trail in Iowa. Night is the Hulk's time. The message feels clearer to Bruce now. In his mind, at least. They're going home. His home. His place of power. The place where he's strongest. Strong enough to beat whatever's inside them. It makes sense. The route is simple enough. Bruce can hitchhike if he keeps to the back roads and small towns. Head west and south across Nebraska and Colorado, then down into... Suddenly, a light blazes in the distance behind him. The shadow it casts distorts and stretches at Bruce's feet. It doesn't take long for him to realize it's not a car. Bruce feels the soft heat on his skin, and Captain Marvel floats there before him, illuminated like a lightning bug. Hello, Bruce, she says flatly. The look on her face does not bode well. Carol, Bruce nods. Always a pleasure. Or is this business? The Avengers have been very good at leaving me alone since I came back. Well, the Hulk helped save the world, Bruce. It earned you a lot of rope. But that was a very different set of Avengers. And if I'm being honest, your ropes run out. More lights appear in the distance. The roaring of a demonic engine echoes down the open road. The headlights are blinding, but Bruce doesn't blink. The car screeches to a halt, and Robbie Reyes, the Ghost Rider, steps out of the car. Then, the Black Panther appears out of thin air. Captain America drops down to the ground, and Iron Man, in his newest Hulkbuster armor, hovers down behind them. Lastly, Thor floats down, With him, one Jennifer Walters. Bruce doesn't respond. Instead, his eyes drift to his cousin. Et tu, Jen? I'm disappointed. Jen stomps forward. Disappointed? You're disappointed. Her face twitches in anger. She grits her teeth. I almost died, Bruce. I was in a coma. And when I woke up, I found out you had yourself killed. You set yourself up to die. Jen's left eye begins to glow. Her body, out of reaction to her rage, is trying to transform her. She does everything she can to keep control. You knew what that would do to me, and you couldn't even do it yourself. You had to force my friend, had to guilt Clint into doing that. One of Hulk's oldest friends, and you knew what that would do to Hulk. Thor places a hand on Jen's shoulder to help her regain control. Bruce just watches. Carol attempts to move the conversation forward, stating they aren't there to hurt Bruce. They can help him. She wants to help him. But right now, she needs Bruce to come with them. Right now? Bruce asks. Are you sure? The sun's gone down. It's night, Carol. It's his time. Carol sighs. Yes, I've spoken to Ms. McGee, Bruce. We've studied the sightings. We know the pattern. Every sighting, it's been the same. Every single one. Night is the Hulk's time. But to set the Hulk free, Bruce Banner has to die. And that's just not going to happen, Bruce. Bruce analyzes the situation. Ultimately, he doesn't have much of a choice. He responds, "But that's my secret, Captain. I'm already dead."